How are you, man? I'm Gil Roth, and you're listening to a bonus episode of my Virtual Memories Show podcast. This is a COVID check-in episode where I record with a past guest of the Virtual Memories Show to find out how they're holding up during the pandemic. As far as how I'm doing, I'm okay. Didn't sleep great, but that was just dietary, not anxiety or anything else. I'm just sort of off rhythm this morning. So let's get to today's show. The great design scholar Stephen Heller is joining me this time. I decided to get in touch with Stephen after I read his recent column in Design Observer, Happiness is the Little Things, which started out with wry little aspects of positivity about pandemic life before becoming increasingly desperate, sad, and full of rage. I figured we should talk at least to give Stephen a little variety in his day-to-day. Not that I was going to serve as some sort of therapist, but maybe just talking to someone different may give him a little something. Also, given where the country has been headed this past week, it would give us an opportunity, give me an opportunity to remind you about the subject of my last conversation with Stephen, the reissue of his important book, The Swastika and Symbols of Hate, Extremist Iconography Today. It's from Allworth Press. That was a good conversation, one that is, of course, more pertinent now, and you may want to check that out as soon as you can. So, The Swastika and Symbols of Hate by Stephen Heller. In better news, he also mentions that he and some partners got together to buy Print magazine recently, and coincidentally, at least according to the banner that popped up when I went to it, today is the official relaunch of Print, which you can find at printmag.com. Stephen's blog, The Daily Heller, continues to unfold there on a daily basis, and it remains one of my favorite reads on the internet. The way he just works on history and personalities of design and little aspects of it, some longer, some interviews, some observations. Anyway, it covers design in a bazillion different ways, and it's just amazing that he manages to do this on a daily basis. Anyway, as caveats go, Stephen was using the internal mic on his computer, and my audio leaked back as an echo once or twice. Also, phone rings about 15 minutes into the conversation. Sorry. Oh, and the Israeli TV show he talks about is Shtisel, Shtisel. It's on Netflix. And there'll be a link to that in the show and episode notes for this one. And here's me and Stephen. How are you dealing? I read your 15 things that bring you happiness, which grow increasingly desperate and unhinged by the end. How are you holding up? It's been a couple of months now in pandemic world.
Well, it sucks.
Yeah, well, we know that, but yeah.
It's the end of the world. How am I dealing? Every day, as I said in that thing, every day I feel, or I said in an earlier post, every day I feel a pit in my stomach. Louise says I'm feeling that there is a pit, that something is in my stomach rather than having a pit in my stomach. I'm lucky. I'm luckier than most. I have a job. I have a paycheck. I have the ability to work at home. I'm not alone. My son, while we haven't seen him in 12 weeks, we're in touch with him, and he's doing pretty well, even though he had the virus.
Oh, he did?
Jeez. Yeah, so he has antibodies now. But, he's done great things. He had a New York accent competition and a New York T-shirt competition and a couple of other things going on. So he's managed to make himself useful during this time. And I just don't like inconvenience. And I certainly don't like crises. And I don't like knowing that other people are suffering. And it was a terrible year for the students. And that's terrible because they missed out on so much. But then I also think about my grandparents and what they had to go through, including the ones that had to go through the Holocaust. And I think of my parents going through the Depression, and I think of all the other terrible things that happen at various intervals. So we were about due for one of those intervals to happen.
Were you able to, I mean, you've written a little about it, make that adjustment with the students, or are certain aspects of what you teach and how you teach just not transferable to that online Zoom?
No, everything was
interface?
transferable, and the students they stepped up to the plate, and they did really well considering, and the faculty did amazing, and my colleagues at SVA did fantastically. As I told the president of SVA when I ran into him in the street the other day, I think I was the first one to crack of my whole team.
Yeah. What did that entail?
It just entailed anxiety that I couldn't get rid of, which I'm sure most people are having. I'm sure nobody is out there saying, gee, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. No. Although some people are making creative pieces, there's a lot of creativity that comes out of tragedy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my anxiety was the beginning, middle of March, when the president fucked up the Oval Office speech and the NBA shut down that same night and everything else. That next day was I need to get some chemical assistance for this because I'm going to go through significant anxiety moving forward. It turned out not to be as bad as the weeks progressed. I've gotten more accustomed, I guess, but those early weeks of utter uncertainty when all the information kept changing on us and the numbers in New York and New Jersey, where I am, kept getting worse and worse. That's sort of what I wonder, whether there's that sort of acclimation period or if you're finding it more difficult and more wearing as the weeks go by.
Well, I think as we become more abnormally normal, it becomes worse. There is, although I have this very strange feeling, I go out as much as I can, which is maybe every other day. And I like the fact that the city is virtually empty. Yesterday, I went to pick up some food on the east side and ran into a demonstration of maybe a few hundred people. And I ended up walking right through the demonstration and thinking, this is just so anomalous. But at the same time, this is what my normal is. And, we do all adapt to our normals after a while. Doesn't mean we have to like them. I don't like that I haven't been able to do much exercise in the last 12 weeks. I don't feel particularly good not doing it. I have insomnia. I don't like that. But, these are all things that happen, and so far, so good. I mean, I've known people who have passed away, but they haven't passed away because of COVID. They've passed away for other reasons at the same time that COVID is taking place. So, ultimately we'll joke about this period of time and hope that it doesn't come back.
I'll keep our fingers crossed. My day job immerses me in the pharmaceutical industry and the federal government, so I've got weird priors about that whole situation. But,
well, then you probably know better than most what the drug industry is doing to keep the right medicines out of the people's hands.
It's a very complicated matrix of decisions that has to be made. And luckily I'm just involved in the manufacturing side of it as opposed to all the R&D and the marketing and distribution and all that stuff. So I can at least feel like we're just trying to make stuff for people and make sure whenever a vaccine gets developed that there'll actually be some way to make it all. But when you talk about getting out and walking, did you have a sort of trepidation walking through the crowd, or were you
No, walking
Had
through
you almost forgotten?
that crowd, I had my mask on, I had my gloves on.
Yeah.
And actually most of the people in the crowd had their protective gear on. So no, there was no trepidation. There is more of a trepidation just walking around the block a few times because, it's a kind of obstacle course. And the people that are out in my neighborhood don't always wear their masks. And we don't even know whether the masks work or not. But, you ultimately do what you have to do. I would like to see when school opens again in the fall that it is face-to-face learning, because online learning is very difficult, and it's not what these kinds of students want. They want network, they want community, and that's something you can try to approximate online, and Zoom has been, a wonderful experience insofar as it's there when we needed it, but it's not a wonderful experience. It's, the novelty has worn off a long time ago.
Yeah. We have the same thing in the field that I'm in with trade shows and conferences all going virtual. There's none of just the accidental meetings and the little side conversations in a hallway, all the serendipity and all that stuff is gone. So I imagine on a student level, there's also just those lack of opportunities just to kind of quietly shoot the breeze with somebody right after, a class or something like that, where it has to be more formal and invitation, email, etc.
And also a lot of those students either have gone back to their home countries or are stuck here wondering what's going to happen. And, as I said, there are lots of people who are facing it worse than I am. And there are a lot of people that don't have the luxury of having advantages. This really shows, a lot of disparity, which we've heard a million times before, but it's true and it's heartbreaking.
Right. Now, I don't want this to sound weird as it's going to sound. When I think of you, I think of work and sort of teaching, producing, making your books, etc. Are you as focused as far as work goes, especially now that a semester's finished and you're in between? Are you occupied? Are you able to work in a way that you'd been able to in the past?
Well, my work at school is, my co-chair runs the day-to-day operations, and she stepped up to the plate brilliantly. So, it's not all that different. I'm just not being able to go into the office where I feel more comfortable. I wake up in the morning, I'm disoriented. I thought of designing a watch that just has the day of the week on it and not the hour. So you might have 2 weeks on your watch, split in half, 7 and 7 days. As far as work goes, the books I've been working on have been completed and they're postponed until the spring. So with a couple of exceptions, there's not a lot that I have to do. I haven't really thought of much that I want to produce that's new. I am working on a memoir, so I have time to do that. So, I'm not focused the way I have been, but I think that was kind of dissipating anyway. I'm going to be 70 in July, and that is taking up more of my psychic energy than anything else. That's the Rubicon that one crosses. You think every decade is a Rubicon, but this is like a real Rubicon.
In terms of 70, or is it something else that's had significance for you?
Well, 7 is a lucky number for me. So being 70 is kind of like the last time I'm going to hit that lucky number. Just as I thought 2020 was going to be a terrific number for people because it's the last time ever that we're going to hit that date, 2020. Mm-hmm. And while I am not a numerologist or a Kabbalist or anything else, I do have superstitions, and they're very often numerical.
Yeah. Because I've got 50 coming up in January. So, I've been sort of putting off the contemplating whether that's a major life step or not. So now I know I could put it off for another 20 years.
Well, you've got many more years to go than I do, technically and biologically speaking. So when I hit 50, yes, it was a major episode. You've turned another corner. You're at this point supposed to be getting close to being a grandparent. You're often at the same age somebody in your family has passed away. But 70 is like, past retirement age. So it's much more significant in many numerological ways and lifestyle ways.
Is retirement something you've contemplated?
No.
Okay. Again, I think of you and I think of work. So I couldn't imagine hearing the word retirement from your mouth until just now. So.
No, but I'm technically retired from the New York Times because I left and I'm on a pension. I'm not retired from the School of Visual Arts, but I'm not doing the same amount of work I did 10 years ago. But friends of mine who are in their late 70s and 80s are still working their butts off. So, I know it's not an age thing. It used to be a social decision. Or a corporate decision. You retire when you're 65. And that's when you start collecting Social Security. So all of this stuff is artificially imposed upon us.
Right. And we're all supposed to keep working until we drop at this point.
At this point, you kind of need to, given all the debt that's in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not something I'm looking forward to. I'm supposed to turn 65 pretty much the year that Social Security is supposed to go insolvent. So,
you have something to look forward to.
Yeah, it's always the end of the world. That's what I figured.
Exactly.
Now, every time we talk, you've given me suggestions as far as things you've been binging on with Netflix, Amazon Prime, etc. A, do you have any? B, do you find you're binging a bit more than you had been in the past?
Well, I just finished binging on Schnitzel.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Do you know the one Unorthodox?
Yeah.
Netflix. Yeah. Well, it's the character who plays the lead, the woman who breaks away from the Hasid community, plays in this one as a young woman. She's younger in this, in fact, physically. And this one is an Israeli production that takes place in Israel with the, I don't even know what the sect is. In Unorthodox, it was the Satmar. And in this one, it's a kind of, it's more conservative than Lubavitch, but less conservative than the Messianics. And it's fascinating. It's 24 episodes at the moment. And it's all done in Hebrew/Yiddish with subtitles. And the actors are incredible. And you just get sucked into this, very strange community that if you are Jewish, is very hard to relate to. Under any circumstances. So I first saw Unorthodox and I felt bad that it was only 4 episodes, but, they did it well in 4 episodes. And then somebody suggested I see this, which I did. And it partly came because there was nothing to binge on. I had seen everything that I wanted to see. And then I became, totally addicted. I just saw the last episode yesterday, so I'm without an addiction right now. But brilliant writing, brilliant acting, brilliant filmmaking. I urge everybody to see it. And then there's also just the fact for me that decades ago, I spent a certain amount of time with the Hasidic community in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. And, I knew very little about them. I only knew that my grandmother was very upset with me for spending any time with the Hasidic community, because going back to her childhood, they were a very negative force in her life.
Yeah. And
in her father's life. So, they have, you can look at a lot of strange communities, cultish communities, or communities that are alien to you, but when they're kind of blood linked, or culturally linked, the deep state cousins. So I've been doing that. I've been reading some interesting books, reading a lot more Philip Roth lately, because I got involved in the series Plot Against America, which I had read when it first came out. And I did a couple of interviews with designers who were doing props for it. And so I reread the book, which I realized I didn't particularly care for when I read it the first time. And the show was kind of mediocre, and the book itself lost a lot of its strength. Even when I was reading it the first time, I think Roth got bored with it by the end. Is he related to you?
No, but there's a story.
Go ahead.
The story is one that I unfortunately can't repeat, because it would bring shame and embarrassment on one or both of my parents. But no, we're not related, although Roth was my white whale as far as the podcast goes. He was the guy I kind of built the whole show to hunt down, and the closest I got to him was 2 weeks before his death. And that was, Alberto Manguel was the guy who's like, oh yes, I know Philip, but he's in very poor health. And I thought he meant in general. He's like, no, Gil, very poor health. And I was like, okay, I get what you mean. 2 weeks later, he was gone. And I've managed to give myself new reasons to do the show since then. And I took some solace when Nathan Englander told me he never would have done this podcast, Gil. It's just not a thing he would have ever done. I'm like, I know. I figured he wouldn't have, but the fact that I never made the try.
Well, I had lunch with him once, if that makes you feel better.
I always love anyone who had any sort of connection to him. Yeah. How was that? What was the circumstance?
The circumstance was at the Times decades ago when I was doing the book review. Harvey Shapiro was the editor at the time. We would have these lunches with the managing editor of the paper, Arthur Gelb, wonderful man. Mm-hmm. And Hilton Kramer would be at these lunches, who was not a wonderful man. Oh. And Philip Roth was invited to one of them, and he came, and I got blasted for a cover I did of Philip Roth, a portrait of him that Hilton thought was horrible. And so it was very embarrassing. And Arthur Gelb said, you have to go speak to Hilton and find out why he didn't like this. So I forced myself to go to his desk and spend some time with him talking about it. And it didn't solve anything, and it didn't add anything to my life other than I disliked this guy from the beginning, and I continued to dislike him.
Understood. I'm glad I never interacted with him at all. I think died before I started doing this whole business. So I do agree with you about, I haven't watched the TV series yet, but the novel of Plot Against America was not, I didn't enjoy it too much when I read it a few years ago. It was the one Roth that fell out of sequence for me because when it came out, personal circumstance, didn't get around to reading it, read the subsequent bunch of books, and then a few years ago finally sat down with it. Yeah.
Well, I think this one, if what I did after I read this was read the fact.
Yeah.
And so it became clearer to me why he wrote it. It didn't, it's very autobiographical and what if, but I appreciated it more after reading Facts.
Yeah. I'll have to go back and give it a look. Give the Facts a look again. I picked up the Library of America editions of Roth, thinking I would sit down with those instead of the single editions, but now I have twice as many books on my shelf, basically.
Yeah, now it's better to read individual books.
Yeah. Yeah, I kept thinking I would be, I don't know, more studious if I had, a whole series of them in a single volume, but never holds up.
It just means you're pressured more. You're stressed to finish them.
Well, I'm reading the periodic table right now by Primo Levi,
right.
And started in the single volume paperback I had from the 80s, and then thought, well, I probably should read that revised translation by Ann Goldstein in the 3-volume gigantic slipcase collected Primo Levi. And the pressure isn't just that there's 2,900 pages. It's the physical pressure of holding an 800-page volume, a hardcover in your book, in your hand, while trying to just read page after page. So I'll probably go back to, maybe a crappier translation from the 80s and,
Well, I just finished a 500-page book on autobiography of Frank Capra. And it wasn't designed very well. The type is really awful. So it was an easy read insofar as his life was very interesting. And whether he embellished it or not, I'm not sure. But getting through the typography was a chore. Yeah.
Yeah, that's also there are books I can't read once I've put my contacts in the morning. So I have to schedule my day around when I will get some reading in that book in, because after that I can put in my contacts and start the rest of the day and function well. But yeah, bad typesetting and point sizes just kill me. I don't understand how mass market paperbacks used to work, given how small the point size looks to me now. But
people got used to it is what happened.
I always say there's much more entertaining ways to go blind than that. But anyway, that's my Philip Roth sort of comment, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the aspects of pandemic life I was sort of wondering about, do you find yourself in contact with old friends, old acquaintances more in these past 2 or 3 months? Are you reaching out to people, or are people reaching out to you that you hadn't heard from in a long time?
In the beginning, there were emails. Yeah. Just, how are you? Are you okay? Now there are periodic cocktail hours on Zoom. Yeah. And not with a lot of people. Social distancing is distancing socially. So I haven't seen my doorman in 12 weeks, although he'll call up to send up a box or a package or something. And although that may not sound like a major loss, it is, because he's a lovely guy. And one of the doormen passed away, not from COVID, but, we weren't able to go to the funeral or anything. But no, there hasn't been a huge, the best reunion is with cousins of mine that are in New York and Paris, and their kids my second cousins are in different places. So we've done that twice, and that's been nice. But, I think you ultimately do what you're able to do. And that's why I do thank Zoom for being in existence, that we wouldn't have been able to do this otherwise.
Have you figured out your best Zoom angle yet, or did you give up on that early on?
No, I never
how to tilt the... Okay.
I never did that anyway. I mean, my Zoom angle is like, which is what I'm doing right now, is I talk using computer light and not any other light. So it's very much
sort of grainy.
It's grainy and haunting.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any sort of project you're hoping to engage in? Or has anything occurred to you as, this is pandemic life, this is the thing I should be doing if I'm going to be stuck here?
Well, before the pandemic occurred, with 5 other people, I became a partner in print magazine. We bought the rights to the magazine, and we've been publishing online ever since. So that's been for about 3 months or so. We're doing a total relaunch June 15th. And so, other people are involved. So we're all trying to get our visions together and figure out what we want to add or subtract or whatever. So I still have my daily column to do, and I'm still writing once a week for Design Observer. Other than that, I do kind of like just taking it slow and easy. Today I had to finish a couple of pieces. I should have done it over the weekend, but I just felt like sleeping over the weekend. And, there are some thoughts I've had for projects, but I haven't pushed them anywhere.
I was in super productive mode for about 2 months. I was doing these daily and turning them around. And a few weeks ago, it turned into, what if I took Sunday off? How would that feel? And it felt good not to just be on the same treadmill. And then Memorial Day weekend hit, and I thought, what if I took 3 days off? And will I lose my rhythm, lose steam? I didn't lose steam, didn't lose rhythm, but not pushing all the time did help in terms of feeling recharged and feeling like I was not putting myself on a treadmill or creating a responsibility that didn't have to exist. So yeah, that's sort of just what I was wondering, whether you're able to moderate that, or whether new stuff's occurring to you that,
Well, I'm working on a few projects with Seymour Quast, who is will be 89, and he's up in the Connecticut for the pandemic.
Oh, he got away?
And so we talk periodically and work on his projects. But he's, 89, and he said to me the other day when he finished something, he said, okay, well, now I got to find something else to do. And my response was, yeah, I'm just going to take it easy and binge on Schnitzel. So, and part of it, I'd say, has to do with the license I give myself is, that 70 turn.
Yeah.
I don't have to prove anything to anybody, so I'll just take it easy and try to keep the guilt level low.
As Jews, that is our constant challenge.
Yeah, right.
And the anxiety on the flip side of it.
Well, the anxiety happens every day, no matter what. It's just there, and it's not going to be handled chemically, and it's not going to be handled through talk therapy. It's just going to have to work its way out. Heavy breathing. If I ever could learn to meditate, maybe that would help.
That's come up with a couple of past guests. I'm actually starting to look at it now. I figure if it could help people as varied as David Lynch and Howard Stern, maybe, it does have some benefit, but I'll let you know what I end up finding. But, otherwise anxiety is my drug of choice. So
yeah, well, anxiety is with us all, and hopefully it doesn't kill you.
I'll keep that in mind. But Stephen, thanks for coming on. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I do want to I just want to tell you, I hope we can get together again. Actually, I should ask that. Where do you want to go? Is there somewhere that you're either in New York or Italy or something that you're just dying to get to?
Well, that's the sad part. I don't think there's going to be much more traveling. You know, we watch a lot of Italian movies just to soak in Trastevere or Rome in general, or Florence. We were going to go to Paris and London for my birthday, and that's not going to happen. And it's going to be a long time before I get on an airplane again. You know, after 9/11, it took me 2 years to get on an airplane. And that was only because I went first class on Virgin and it was paid for. So I've been hunkered down in New York in my apartment here. And we've had our house in the country, which we haven't availed ourselves of. But the gardening is going on and the lawn is being mowed. So we'll probably go up there in a couple of weeks and see what it's like. But it's actually easier to function in the city with Fresh Direct and Amazon than go up to the country reliant on the car.
Yeah, delivery options and the logistics got to be a lot easier here or there in New York.
Yeah.
Anywhere in the city that you would love to just sit down in, or bookstore you want to walk into, or is it just being able to go back to your office?
There's not much in the city actually at this point anymore. You know, the great stores are gone. When you see everything closed, you got to wonder what's going to open again. So the restaurants that are favorites have been closed, and hopefully they'll reopen. When I walk, I tend to walk towards Madison Square Park, and that usually has a fair number of people in it. I'd like to go. I took the car out last weekend just to make sure it worked and drove by my office. And that was enough for me. I didn't have to go inside.
Yeah, I get you. I've been doing one drive a week myself just to make sure the car is functioning, but I did think of driving into New York just to see what it's like to be in the city when there's no one around.
Well, surprisingly, you know, the first couple of weeks there was really no one, and now there, you know, is a limited amount of traffic. But you know, it's there. People are still in the city. It just feels like it's a Sunday or a Memorial Day.
Yeah, yeah. I missed my chance. Otherwise, I could have done the that high speed trek. There's a race basically to circumnavigate Manhattan. I forget what the winning time is, but it's something that's dangerously fast. So,
well, you can still get from uptown to downtown on the FDI pretty quick.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll give it a race at some point. I'll wave as I pass by. But anyway, thanks for coming on. Okay. And like I say, I hope we can get together in person.
Thank you very much, and stay healthy.
And that was Stephen Heller. Go check out his blog at Print Magazine, The Daily Heller, at printmag.com/daily-heller. That's HELLER. He's also on Twitter and Instagram as The Daily Heller. I'll have a link to all that, plus his Design Observer essay, Happiness is a Little Things, in the show and episode notes for this one. Stephen's published innumerable books, and I'll also have a link to his website that has a catalog of all that stuff. And you should check out our previous full-length episode to learn more about his book on extremist iconography, The Swastika and Symbols of Hate. It is unfortunately more necessary than ever. And we'll be back tomorrow with another COVID check-in. Visit vmspod.com and chimeraobscura.com/VM to find a link to the COVID-19 sessions. And you can get all of these daily episodes, which I've been doing since late March. You can also subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show via iTunes, Spotify, or other podcatchers to make sure you get every episode, including the 370 or so in-person ones I recorded in the before time. Now, This is where I ask you guys for money, but not for me. If you can spare anything, I don't need it. My job continues to pay me just fine. It looks like I'm secure in that role going forward. But there are a lot of people who are in need right now. And those are the artists and writers. A lot of them are guests on this show. So if you can find, not Stephen, if you can find the Patreons, Kickstarters, GoFundMes, Indiegogos, tip jars, whatever for the artists, writers, and others that you like, then show them some support. If you're not comfortable giving to individuals, because that can make people uncomfortable, both the giving and the receiving, you can find worthwhile charities. There's a lot of them out there, like your local food bank. There are a lot of places that'll help people in need right now. Also, there are bail funds and freedom funds and the like. There are a lot of arrests that are going on because of the protests. Peaceful demonstration is guaranteed by the Constitution, and these people could use your support. I'm Gil Roth. It is Wednesday, June 3rd, 2020, and this was a bonus episode of my Virtual Memory Show podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Keep the conversation going, stay safe, and wash your damn hands.